Jess Swearingen, Patrick Updike,
Present on the phone.
Jess Sunholm,
Present.
Marty Smith,
Present.
Tom Lampy,
Present from Dallas on the phone.
John Benson,
Present.
Bob Von Wolfrat,
Present on the phone.
Denise Pavlik, Andy Buffington,
Present.
Ellen Hagan,
Present on the phone.
Deb Krebel, David Ness,
Here.
Jason Leonard,
Here.
Rob Rotter,
Here.
Mike Casper,
Present.
Carol Lund Smith,
Present.
Larry Smith,
Here.
Linda Frederickson,
Present on the phone.
Kelly Grosskirth,
Present on the phone.
got a quorum. Oh, Jeff Swearingen,
Swearingen.
already.
All right, thank you. Can I get a introduction of the board member, starting the ones on the phone, please? How about Bob? I'll start with you.
State CIO.
Thank you. Patrick?
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Tom?
Tom Lampy, DPS.
Ellen?
Ellen Hagan, Joe Fire and Rescue, representing volunteer firefighters.
You? Kelly?
Kelly Grosskirth, member at large, city manager, City of Trainer.
Thank you. Linda?
Linda Frederickson, Medic EMS, representing the Iowa EMS Association.
Thank you. Are there any other board members on the phone that jumped in a little bit later?
Denise Pavlik.
Chris Meyer.
Denise, go ahead.
Go ahead, Denise.
Denise Pavlik, Scott Emergency Communication Center, representing communication centers.
Thanks, Denise. And who else?
Chris Myers, Swick, from Dallas.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, how about the introduction of board members starting down here to my right? Carol?
Carol Lund Smith, Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
Andy Buffington, Winnebago and Hancock County Emergency Management Communications, representing communication centers.
Dave Ness, Municipal Police from Des Moines.
Jeff Sunholm, Department of Transportation.
Jason Leonard, Waverly Police Department, representing Municipal Police.
Craig Allen, Swick.
Larry Smith, Kika County Emergency Management, representing emergency management.
Mike Casper, Lynn County Sheriff's Office, representing sheriff's offices.
Marty Smith, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff, representing sheriff's offices.
John Benson, Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management.
Okay, sorry to the board members and stuff that we don't have seats for up here, I guess, so. My other welcoming remarks and stuff, I appreciate everybody being here today that can be. We have a lengthy agenda. My process with this is that once we get to the new business sections of it, because we still have a good number of our members on the phone, that we will roll call those votes as well. So things that we will be doing, taking votes on, we will be taking rolls for. So just get ready for that. So with that, can I have approval of today's agenda, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Mike. Can I get a second? Second. Okay. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Okay. I guess moving forward, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Moving on, the approval of meeting minutes. I'm sure that everybody had a chance to actually look through them. If you have, could you take a minute to look through them, and I'll take a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last month. Okay. You have a correction on the minutes?
It shows me as absent. I was actually on the phone.
Okay. Ethan, will you notate that, please? Thank you. Thanks, Carol. Okay. Thank you, David, for the motion to approve the minutes as amended. Can I have a second, please?
Larry Smith, second.
Larry Smith, thank you. Been moved and seconded. Any other additions, corrections, discussion about the minutes? Hearing none, can I have a vote in favor of accepting them? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. Let's move on to the SWIC's report.
Thank you, Chair. With your approval, I will ask SWIC Chris Myers to give his report first, and then I'll fill in the gaps. I know how difficult it is to do that over the phone. So, Chris, please proceed.
Thank you, SWIC Allen. Vice Chair Leonard and Chairman Lampy and the rest of the Isicsb board. I'm happy to report that training is going well. I have been learning a lot from working with both Chairman Lampy and SWIC Allen. Everybody at DPS and Isicsb has been very welcoming, and I feel like I'm getting a really good sense of the history and where we've been, where we're going, and where we need to go after that. And my plan that I wrote out for training, I've been able to follow it. So I feel like I am ready to take ownership of what's going on here and help the board meet its objectives going forward. Part of that training was going to the Lean Technology Conference in St. Louis with Chairman Lampy and SWIC Allen. Learned quite a bit from there and made some good contacts, and may have some excellent interoperability material to present going forward with law enforcement from other areas of the country where they have a very well-established interoperability network. I'm planning some outreach to counties regarding Isicsb and what its capabilities are and what it could bring for them. And that has been a very well-received idea so far. So we're working to develop a further strategy to clarify any questions about the build-out of Isicsb, what coverages and capabilities will be as well. That's all I have. If there's no questions for me, I will turn it back to SWIC Allen.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. So as Mayor said, we attended the LEIM conference, which is the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And what a conference it was. It's really changed for those of you that may have attended one in the past. Typically, there was a lot of radios and radio equipment. This time, there was only a couple of booths of radios, one booth of MDTs, and almost everything else was software-based technology. A lot of the presentations were about how they are implementing artificial intelligence and how that is changing the landscape, bringing us to more predictive analytics. Chicago did a number of presentations. Los Angeles had one. There's just a lot of, the good news is, from my perspective, they're using the money that is coming to those urban UASCs and finding ways to put it to use that will come out to those of us that don't necessarily have a UASC in our backyard. So the technologies that they're growing out of the grant funds are pretty exciting stuff. Conducted a lot of research this month, continued making phone calls, have made several trips on the ISSI challenge before Iowa, and that will be covered under item 19 later today. You should have received a staff study document to review earlier today. Most of the energy has been going into attempting to make sure that the skip process goes smoothly, elegantly, and promptly. Chris and I have spent a good deal of time on the phone with DHS and with representatives within the state. There's been a total of 2 on-site meetings and several over the phone call, conference lines, and just a lot of getting ready for putting together the Iowa 5-year plan for interoperability. And that's particularly germane because first, the radio system is on track to be done towards the end of this year, finally accepted next year, which means that the ink will barely be dry on this report before it will probably need some adjustments. The second thing is that the broadband efforts that are going to be front and center are likewise being addressed right now in Texas with Chair Lampe and the team. So whatever information we have to work with, we will certainly plan around that, but fully expect that the vendors and those users will be putting their foot on the gas and pulling up on the steering wheel, trying to make that go as fast as possible to get information out. So we can fully expect that the skip will be done sometime in July after the 28th meeting in June. So anyone that's interested, please come to the meeting at Grandview College on 14th Street. It will start at about 9 o'clock on the 28th of June, and we look forward to everyone's participation. Had discussions with, spent a bit of time this month on encryption. That is a sticky wicket for us in Iowa because we're moving from VHF and more legacy technology into a technology that now requires an update of encryption keys with great frequency. And for those that can't do it over the air or outsource their encryption keys to a private vendor, it looks like it triggers a cost. And so the discussion on that has been ongoing, and the technology committee may have something to report on that, but it's an area that I suspect I will be back to visit after I'm gone. So we have set aside encrypted channels in the interoperability talk groups should there come a time for encryption. And there will probably, for the board members here, we probably will need to revisit the policy statement that we have on interoperability channels and how they're used, because it does make a reference to not encrypting on interoperability channels. So clarification of what's the difference between a channel, a frequency, and a talk group might be appropriate, but that particular policy statement will need some work. And then on an exciting note, met with some counties about how they might interface with the statewide system as it rolls out. So they're interested in how do they tie into it from a VHF or their existing system perspective. And there's a lot of ways to do that. We'll talk about some of those today in the ISSI conversation. Some are very complicated, some are somewhat simple, but we'll talk about that more. And that probably would wrap up the lion's share of the things we took care of this month.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions? Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Craig. E91, council report. Chair Ray is gone, so I think Blake's going to take over for that, as well as doing the program manager report, correct? All right.
Thank you. Good morning. The text to 911 rollout continues. We now have 46 answering points that can receive text to 911. We are going to, you might start to hear public service announcements on the radio starting next week, talking about that and mostly promoting the text if you can, call if you can, text if you must, messaging on reaching an answering point that way. We'll also have flyers to send out to the PSAP so they can use to educate their citizens as well. So those will be going out next week as well. Also, we have the administrative rules meeting set for June 13th, tentatively. That will kind of associates with Senate File 500. Mostly it's a technical cleanup at this point. And then a public hearing scheduled for our office at Homeland Security on the Hickman office at 11 o'clock on June 27th. Also, at the 911 Council meeting, we passed a resolution in support of the NENA I3 standard. This came up a couple months ago when a organization kind of attacked that standard very publicly and very kind of out of the blue. NENA I3 is the standard that the state of Iowa has used per our operation plan. So we basically created a resolution that supports the NENA I3 standard. There's been a lot of support of the NENA I3 standard since that time. I bring this up. We have the template here. I'd like to provide it if there's any chance that the Interop Board would also entertain a resolution to support that standard that kind of drives 911. Basically, that a public attack on the standard itself is only going to serve to create chaos amongst vendors, amongst PSAPs, amongst statewide programs that continue to work towards Next Gen 911. So I think it's been fairly public that that rollout to Next Gen 911 has been a little bit slow nationwide. We've done a great job here in Iowa, but this public attack has kind of served to halt progress even more and introduce more chaos into that environment. So I'll present that. I'll leave it with the Vice Chair, and if there's any questions, I'll answer them now.
I appreciate it, Blake, all your work. Thank you, sir. Okay. Moving on, Chair Buffington, the User Group Committee, please.
All right, thank you. Continue to have our monthly meetings, obviously. The RIC, the Regional Interoperable Committees, there's still a desire for those chairs, where they have those chairs, is to get more participation. Obviously, the outreach meetings we're hoping will spur some of that involvement. The final outreach meeting was held yesterday in Mason City for Region 2 with good participation. I believe Region 5, Larry was saying that you guys had 27 at yours. So there's a lot of interest, a lot of great questions as those continue to roll along. Applications, what we're finding is that we're going to need to relook at our process. Right now, the process is that the letter of intent goes to Chair Lampe. Chair Lampe forwards that to me. If I have contact information, I'll forward the MOA as well as the matrix for them to fill out to them, and then they get that back to me. Anyway, I believe that Chair Lampe and I, as well as any interested party, we're going to need to make sure that we streamline that, because in all honesty, no fault of anyone's other than the fact that we've missed consideration of some things that have been done. We're not talking about months and months, but 6 weeks late really is where we're at. So that doesn't get considered until next Thursday at our meeting. And we also, some of the structures we have in place is that the applicant review panel needs to go do a little bit of a deeper dig. Again, that's all about making sure that doing a loading analysis so that, if we approve something, we're not going to disable the system as we go. So there just needs to be some more work on it to make sure that as we're moving into bringing more people onto Isicsb, that we don't unnecessarily delay people. And again, not necessarily anyone's fault, but we just need to make sure that we communicate better, and we're going to continue to work on that. We talked about the standards working group and the work that Tracy and her team has been doing. Some of the things that was brought up during UGC discussion was talking about maybe a need for some sort of policy. When we talk quite a bit about work groups right now, or I'm sorry, talk groups, and one of the things that was brought up is what happens if County A wants to bring County B's fire, EMS, and law talk groups over into their fleet map, so that they can have easy access. So if everybody does that, what does that do for loading analysis? And we're going to try to work with operations and technology and anybody else that has, obviously governance, anybody else that has skin in the game on that specifically, so that as these come up, we can do a thorough loading analysis as well as being able to provide the structures so that we know what's going on at the board level. That those things aren't just done in the blind, and we don't end up with a problem as we move down the road. We continue to talk about the weather service, the WFOs, and how we would integrate communicating with the PSAP and the communication centers on do we go with a single talk group for all of those? The warning coordination meteorologist here in Johnston would be more in favor of having a single talk group for each one of the WFOs. There's 5 that serve the state of Iowa. Again, we have time, but not that much. So as we move forward, we're going to continue to keep that on our plate. We also discussed things like getting the hospitals more engaged, because as those EMS users migrate over to Isics on the 700 platform, we're going to make sure, we need to make sure that they're still able to communicate those inbound and outbound messages for patient reports and different things like that. And again, we also talked about roaming. You know, how do we monitor roaming? Do we just assume that everybody's going to have that roaming channel up at every comm center across the entire state of Iowa? The reality is that would be great. Or, I'm sorry, the vision would be that would be great. The reality is that's probably not going to happen. So that's going to get into operationally working with it, whether it's DPS or somebody else, and talking to them about who's going to monitor that roaming channel, so that if a deputy or anyone is making some sort of transport across the state of Iowa, that if they need assistance from locals, if they're having a problem with whether it be a patient or an inmate or anything like that, that they were able to summon help quickly, and someone's going to hear that, and we don't just hope that that's going to happen. And then the last thing we really talked about was that assistance again for those users that are not familiar with or used to what a trunked environment is like. And what are the needs, those basic needs? You know, how do we set up a talk group? Do we need 70 of them for a small county? Do we need 5 of them? You know, Swick Allen has said that, you know, at our next meeting there was a white paper that he had put out that really didn't get any publication, but he's going to bring it back to us at the UGC that talks about some potential fixes to be able to go out and assist those smaller agencies with that transition if that's what they choose to do. So with that, that's about all we had on our plate, and I'll entertain any questions this time.
Swick Allen has a question.
Sir.
You mentioned the interoperability channels between 2 counties. So basically, sharing an operational channel gets close to being an interoperability channel, in how you described it, with the county fire department in one county sharing information with the next county over. There was a presentation at the SafeCom in Nixwick put on by Houston and the Harris County folks about how they managed the Super Bowl. And it was interesting to see how they started with one set of circumstances like you're describing, and were able to move to getting folks to understand the use of interoperability channels and how to go about using those in pre-planned, not only pre-planned events, but in the event it goes down, here's how we procedurally carry it out. And the reason I bring it up is I suspect that those people would be very interested in helping us. They've already offered to help with the broadband committee to give some background as to how they rolled out broadband and some of the lessons learned from a policy perspective. We're going to talk about that on the 13th at the broadband meeting. But I wonder if the user group committee would be open to maybe a special meeting for about an hour where perhaps those two could share either telephonically or through some sort of a webinar their lessons learned, because at the SafeCom, they could talk for 6 hours on it. There's no question they have enough material to tell us about the evolution, but I bet that there would be a really big value to at least understanding what someone has gone through in the maturation process of going from analog to digital to trunked.
And that's during our discussion. Again, the thinking, the mindset of the legacy users, which I currently reside in, is that we need to hear what our neighbors are doing, and we need to be able to talk. And the discussion was very needs to point to those interop channels. There's, you know, we have each one of the 6 regions have the talk groups. I would be surprised. I mean, it's not impossible, but I would be surprised if every one of the channels in one of those talk groups were ever to fill up. Mm-hmm. So when there is a need to go back and forth, and there's legitimate, I think there's legitimate arguments on both sides for the need to, why we're going to import someone else's talk group into our structure as well. So yeah, I would welcome that, and we'll talk about it again on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, I got some input for you. Just be aware that Iowa Department of Public Health already has all the hospitals on a radio network, and I'd be willing to discuss that with you, the user group committee, or whomever needs to discuss that.
And I assume we're talking about our Beyond.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I just written down. We need to have a further discussion with you on how we can integrate that, that technology into, again, you know, because it's all over the state right now. So
Yes,
how do
sir.
we integrate that with Isics?
Yes, sir. All right.
Thank you, Marty.
No other questions? That's some good dialogue. You know, your presence here on the board is definitely needed and stuff, especially when you're talking about, you know, the hospitals around the state, you know, and with what the load that Andy is trying to pick up here and consistently move. So thank you for your work. Chair Grosskreutz, you're on the phone, Finance Committee.
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Finance Committee met Tuesday afternoon via phone at 2 o'clock. We reviewed the financials. We discussed Connect Iowa renewal contract for Sean Wagner. We discussed a computer program called GenWatch 3, which we'll discuss in a little bit here. And we had some travel requests from Craig Allen. Regarding the financials, the financial update is that in the annual appropriation, we have spent $82,910.67 for fiscal year 2017. Did I just read that wrong? Let me look at that. We have available $173,937.48. And in the grant, we have $487,376.68 remaining on our grant. Regarding the grant, we discussed a little bit that is, we are in line to get some monies again from this same grant. Keep eyes and ears open for other grants. This grant is kind of winding down, and we are hoping to get some of those extra monies that they have been talking about for several months now, and it looks likely that we will. But this is what's building a good portion of our system. So not actually building it, but this is what's giving us the money to operate and get some of these things done that we've been discussing. So we do need to keep our eyes and ears open for grants to continue to operate. Regarding the Connect Iowa contract for Sean Wagner, the Finance Committee recommends that we go ahead and renew that for another year. I believe that is a $7,000 to $8,000 contract. Looking at last year's, I have not seen the renewal to know if it is going to be the same dollar amount this year. If Tom has any information on that, that would be helpful at this time.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a couple things. As far as the Connect Iowa contract, I have not yet firmed up with Connected Nation the next year's price, but I will be doing that. But I could tell you that the bills that have been coming in, and I'm sure your committee has discussed it, it ranges from $7,000 to the low $8,000 a month. That's what it's been doing. That's based on the hours that he puts in and extra duties that he does if he has to travel, etc. So that's what you can figure. I can't guarantee it's going to be higher than eight to 9,000, but I can tell you that's the average. So with that being said, I can renegotiate the contract and get a firm exact price for you, or you can approve a range today. It's up to you. So that's a report on that. The second thing is in regards to the grant, the Isicsb grant. At Dallas, as you all, maybe you don't know, I'm at the State Point of Contact meeting in Dallas for the FirstNet rollout. We do have an imminent plan coming to hit the state here in the next few months, and it's important that I'm here, so I apologize for my absence, but we're required to be here, and it's important that I be here so we get this FirstNet state plan delivered. One of those sessions included the Isicsb 2.0, they call it, and what they told us was our grant will expire at the end of February of 18. Beginning right away in March with no hiccup, there will be another grant issued, and that will go through. There another year, and then after that, it will go through another year after that. So we're good through 2020. But I can tell you that what they're doing with the grant money is they're compiling all the grant monies that were unused through the 50 states and territories that are being returned or unspent at the end of the grant, and pooling it into a money and then redistributing that. So what that means is that it's not going to be as much as we had before, which was $2.1 million. So, but what we have been told, it's enough to cover salaries for the states. So I'm confident that it will. Because as you know, it covers our salaries for our secretary, Ethan. It covers the salary for the SWIC. It covers the salary for Sean Wagner. So I've been told that will all stay in place. So we're at least good through 2020 on that. And then even at 2020, there are also discussions being held now to keep a funding stream of some sort coming to the states for that program. So I'm not concerned about it. So that is the update on that, and I'll get you the exact information on what those amounts will be for Iowa when it gets closer to the end of our grant this fall and towards the beginning of next year.
Okay. Tom, this is Jason. I just was wanting to know, I mean, so that Kelly would know this as well and that the members of the board would know as well. Is there I mean, when you talk about a range, possibly, would it be close to that $7,000 or $8,000 range that you're talking about if you were to renegotiate that contract, that the board would be satisfied with if Kelly made a motion, you know, this is hypothetical, obviously, for no more than 10,000? I mean, would you expect it to be any more than that?
No, I would not. I would recommend the board draw a line in the sand at this point for at least this year, what we're willing to spend. But the averages are high sevens, low 8,000s is what it's been averaging.
Okay.
So Tom, could you repeat that for me, please?
What I would recommend is that look at the averages of the low 7s to 8,000s and then come up with a number. If you would like to pass it today to confirm and put a number in it, you can certainly do that. It's your choice. Or you can wait for me to negotiate a firm price, and you can also direct me to negotiate what price that is going to be or what percentage if you would like. I'll do whatever the board wishes.
Kelly, before you have a response to that, I just, how quickly would this work if Sean's contract is up as of next month, correct? Like late?
July 31st.
Okay. So do we have time?
Another board meeting.
Okay. So we do have another board meeting in between. Okay.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I would guess I would take that into consideration, Kelly. If you didn't want to make a motion on that, we have another board meeting to talk about that with, and to actually come in with concrete dollars.
As long as timeliness isn't an issue, I mean, obviously we've got less than 2 months. However, we have one more board meeting. I would feel more comfortable having Chair Lampe negotiate that amount and set that as long as it is not an issue for Sean, or if there's not going to be any lapse in his payroll or things like that. But if everything else remains equal and constant as it is today, then I guess I would rather see something more firm than just go for a range.
Okay. I know that the timeliness of it is definitely an issue, especially when you're talking about two different agencies and stuff going back and forth. Connect Iowa still have to agree on that as well. So, Dave.
That's my only concern is the timeliness. And in the last, 2 or 3 months, we've missed an official board meeting because we didn't have a quorum, which isn't terribly uncommon in the months of June and July as well. So I would, if there's a general consensus, I would make a motion to authorize up to 10,000, and then with the direction that the final negotiated amount would come back to the board for affirmation. But that at least allows Tom to begin negotiations so we don't end up in a spot where we're not able to meet the deadline.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for that motion. Do I have a second?
This is Kelly. I second that.
Thank you, Kelly. So I have a motion and a second. Do I have any other further discussion on that?
Is Tom? Tom, this is Andy. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. Tom, this is Andy. Do you have the ability to go in and negotiate prior, so that I guess if we're going to do a range, that's one thing, but if do we have to have some sort of motion before that we go in and say that giving you the opportunity to negotiate?
No, I can.
So would you be able to lock, I guess my question is, would you be able to lock something in with nothing more than our approval next month, prior to our next month's board meeting?
You've got a motion. on the
We have a
floor.
motion and we have a motion and a second on the floor. I hear everything that Andy's saying. I have a motion and a second on the floor to accept the contracted rate that Tom would actually negotiate for, up to $10,000 with approval to come at the next board meeting. Is that correct, Dave?
Clarification, that's up to $10,000 per month.
$10,000 per month.
That's correct.
Tom?
That's correct.
That's correct with my motion. And again, it just provides us the latitude that in case we can't achieve a quorum next month, it allows us to keep the employee in place.
Thank you.
All right. Any other further discussion on that? John, sorry. Not sitting up here at the head table.
I will most likely be voting no on this, and it has nothing to do with the fact that we're trying to do something. It has actually to do with the dollar figure, strictly from the standpoint of the board. The board is a recipient of funds from both the General Assembly and from federal grants. And this year, the legislature did decrease the general fund amount, and we're talking about the possibility of increasing a payment to a private contractor. As a state agency, I think we would have some problem with it if it were to exceed. If the direction was to hold fast at the numbers we're presently at, I think we would be supportive. But to allow license for the increase, to essentially let the contractor, it creates a situation where the contractor will dictate the rate, and it puts us in a situation where if we want to maintain, Sean, which I'm fully supportive of, it puts us in an odd fiscal position. So I just wanted to make sure when we do a roll call and I come as a no, I wanted to make sure the board understood why.
I do understand. I do understand your point, John, and I fully support that idea with the budget cuts, and I do realize that. But the slate fee budget did not get cut as far as it relates to state appropriation percentages. As long as the finance committee can determine that there's enough funding in that source based on what I just told you with the through February of 18, and then the renewal of the slate fee 2, which covers salaries. Even though I don't have that exact amount, I see your point.
Okay. Anything else, John? Okay. Anything from anybody else?
I've got a concern about just giving, in a sense, what I term a blank check to a contractor at this time with the way budgets are and our due process. That we've got to make everything fair. In a sense, we're just saying, okay, you can raise your rates to this dollar amount if you want, or my suggestion would be to negotiate a price for a salary, and then the travel is a variable.
Okay. Anything else, Larry? No. Okay. Anything else from the board?
Final comment, perhaps, I hope, from the person that made the motion. I think Tom, in asking him to negotiate, can take into account both what he's heard from Tom and basically all comments from the board. We are not, I don't expect anyone to negotiate by starting with the top dollar, but rather getting the best price he can. So I'm confident he'll be able to do that.
All right. Any other comments from the board? Okay. With that being said, I'd call for a roll call, please. Ethan?
Jeff Swearingen. Patrick Updike.
Aye.
Jeff Sunholm.
I kind of agree with John Benson on just opening us up for a higher contract. I'm going to vote no.
Marty Smith.
Nay.
Tom Lampy.
Aye.
John Benson.
No.
Bob Von Wolfrat.
Aye.
Denise Pavlik,
Aye.
Andy Buffington,
No.
Ellen Hagan,
Aye.
Deb Krebel,
Aye.
David Ness,
Aye.
Jason Leonard,
Aye.
Rob Rotter,
Nay.
Mike Casper,
Aye.
Carol Lund Smith,
Aye.
Larry Smith,
Nay.
Linda Frederickson,
Aye.
Kelly Grosskirth,
I'm thinking, sorry. I'm going to vote. John brings up a very good point. Even though I did make a second, I am going to vote no, but I'm also going to make another motion at the end.
passed.
Is it, okay. Well, the motion passes with, you have to correct me if I'm wrong here on it, Ethan, 12 to 7? Is that correct? I'm making you count,
Yep.
sorry. All right. Motion passes. Well, Tom, I guess you have some direction on that as far as trying to negotiate that contract. I do appreciate the comments and stuff coming from John as well as Larry as well, and everybody else as well too. So anyway, moving on, Kelly, go ahead.
I will comment on my no. If I know we're moving on. In the future, let's make those motions to grant Tom the authorization to negotiate, so that we don't set up, a dollar amount for that contractor. John made some very good points on that. Apologize for the confusion on that. Genesis program, or Gen Watch 3. Rob Dennert joined from a vice chair of the user group, joined the finance committee the other day to explain what this is, and we're going to have Rob probably explain more of that. I'll give you the finance committee's view on the Gen Watch program. We discussed that there is a need for a program that is able to ensure our contractual requirements are being met. One of those contractual requirements is the grade of services requirement, that our contract requires that there's one busy per 100 push-to-talks. And this Gen Watch 3 can monitor that and put it in a report that all of us can understand that this is or is not occurring for us. And then we have a way to measure that. We do agree that that is needed. This program is bigger than that. It also allows us to take all the data that is being received every time somebody pushes the talk, et cetera. Rob can go into more detail about that. And it puts it into readable forms and reports with little to no labor. The current system has all that data, but somebody's going to have to take and pull that data and put it in spreadsheets to get it into a readable form. This program does that for us so that you don't have the labor intensive on that. We agree that there's a need. We agree that there's money available today as well as in the future. There's a 15% increase or renewal subscription every year on that, not an increase but renewal. But we are concerned about the procurement process that's been done, and have we done our due diligence as a taxing entity to have that procurement process completed. What we learned from Rob is that this is the only company out there that has such a program that will work with Motorola, and we did ask that he bring that a statement back, a written statement that states such a thing, because this is $25,000 is our share, and that's about 50% of the entire cost of this program. A little bit more than that to get it installed. So we do want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence, that the procurement process has been gone through, and if there is only one company, that we have something in writing that states that there is only one company that can do this such a thing. And I'm going to recommend that this be put on the July agenda pending that we get that procurement process and that statement that this is the only company that can do that.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Would you like to turn it over to Rob? Speak on this project
That
anymore?
sounds like a good idea because he
Okay.
can explain it a lot better than I can as to what this program does.
That'd be great. He's standing here waiting. Go ahead, Rob.
Thanks, Kelly. You did an excellent job, by the way. Up on the screen, I think Master Control can bring up, this is a brochure. It's up, good. GenWatch 3 is an over-the-top, rides the system and interprets data and presents it in a much more usable fashion than what the canned reports that come out of a Motorola system do. I can speak from being a user of a system for a number of years now that several times a month there are requests for information from the system. Things like, are we compliant with a grade of service? An investigation of, was so-and-so's radio on in the middle of the night? Is that why they slept through whatever? So doing those investigations becomes much easier with a product like this. There's a lot of back end, I'll call it the data we can get out, but I've got to do a lot of manipulations to it to be able to present it in a decision maker sort of format. Colors, graphs, all those sorts of things. So if I can run down through this brochure quickly, things like being able to monitor it, much more graphical, much more user-friendly, much more pleasing to the eyes. Statistical reports, again, I've mentioned grade of service, but how busy are sites, talk groups being used, all those sorts of things, radios on the system. More graphs, being able to make decisions about, do we need to move things? Are there too many here, not enough there? Those sorts of things that I think will become very important as we're managing the system now and into the future. I have requested the information that was asked, the additional information by the Finance Committee from the vendor, so we're just waiting to hear back from them. Our salesperson's on vacation right now, so I think waiting until next month when we have all the information, not an issue. Any questions?
Rob, I have a question. So will this system support all users and all the radio networks in the state? So if you are on a different network on the Isicsb system, will it be able to determine the information you're talking about, maybe whether a radio was on, or is it just specific to Motorola product?
Specific to Motorola for the Isicsb platform. One thing about other users, users of the Isicsb platform, yes, they have the ability, it's their iVista piece that allows locals that are, may have brought a local enhancement or need information at a local level can get it. Does that answer your question?
Rob, let's take that to another, he asked a really good question, let's take it another step. So if I'm a county that has a VHF system, but I have some dual mode radios, and in the dual mode, they're identified on the Isicsb system as a user. This would then recognize whether or not my radios were on the network and working at the time, correct?
Correct.
So if a radio was affiliated with the network, directly affiliated with the network, it would work. If it is affiliated, as Marty had just said, with another system and isn't currently on the network, it's on another system, it wouldn't recognize it.
Correct.
Thank you.
I just had a simple question. Is it going to be used for operability? I mean, I know we can't separate the two systems out, but our goal here is to provide this for interoperability and monitoring the system. I just want to make it clear that we should, you know, if there's some funding piece that needs to come from the operable users of this versus the interoperable users.
Absolutely, and I think that's why only half of the cost of it's being asked of the board for that interoperability piece and the broader scale, and the major operability users are billing the other half.
Okay, that's where my funding piece was. Thanks, Rob.
With that, on that same topic, Mike, would that also present an issue for any other local that might be might be on the Isicsb platform and want that, they have that ability already at that cost that we're already paying for, correct? Or would they have to pay something else to access that?
So built in, there is the functionality to be able to give to a local user, an operability user, the ability to monitor and get basic information out of the system.
But if that operability user chooses or wants deeper granularity, there would probably be a cost to them to get the operability side of this Gen 3 Genesis, whatever it's called, feature. So the answer is if they choose operability and operate it on the network, there is still a fee for that. But for interoperability purposes, the board would be able to, through the system administrator, drill down and answer whatever problems or address whatever concerns may come up as the system goes forward and bringing additional users on. So as those occur, as we had conversations about this, there were some other counties in other states of which I was familiar with that had some catastrophic events to the radio system, and it took several days to get it worked out. And this particular technology is one that they have not chosen to use and appears to be helping in knowing when you need to go to your storm plans. So just to have them set up isn't helpful. You have to know when to trip the trigger and get people on them so that the system doesn't go into, I'm not going to call it catastrophic failure, but it isn't working in the way that everyone expects. So I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Yeah, I was going to use the example of Westcom, for example, that the basic information out of the system may not be enough for us, and being able to add licenses and use it as a full user and get more information certainly is an option.
I have a question. So we're talking about half of the cost is going to be borne by the board for the interoperability. And so those users that choose to go on to Isicsb as operationally for their day-to-day, they're going to be assessed a fee?
No.
And who pays?
They don't. They determine whether or not they get the service.
Okay, so they
So
can.
it's like buying it. So they can buy a plain
it,
radio, or they can buy a dual band radio. They can buy so that particular aspect is an enhancement that they make a choice to purchase. Right.
Thank you.
That was how it's.
I just wanted to clarify, so there's nothing.
Yeah, no clawbacks.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Probably see you next month.
Thanks, Rob. Again, Kelly was talking about bringing it forward possibly next month, for approval. Anything else, Kelly?
We just have one travel request for Craig Allen for the P25 standards meetings, 1,045. And those are, Tom can approve those, just letting the board know what those are.
Okay, well, we'll just let Tom take care of that, I guess. Go ahead.
This is Tom. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but did not the board approve a range and an amount already for Craig's TIA stuff?
Yes.
So I don't think we need a motion again to approve a travel request if we've already approved an amount, right?
No, that's just to inform the board. So.
Okay.
Okay. Kelly, anything else?
All the finance. That's all.
Thank you, ma'am. Chair Benson, governance.
All right, real briefly, we only had 2 items on our agenda this last month. The first one is the systems keys policy, which came out of the standards committee, which we'll be discussing under new business, item number 20. And then the second was an item that Chair Lampe asked us to appoint a member to participate in the standards committee. So we did appoint, and I can't believe he volunteered, but he did, Chief Sykosh from Ames PD, with Dean McKenna from Story County Sheriff's Office backing him up, so they will be our representatives on the standards committee. And until we get to number 20, that is the gist of my report for the month.
Very good. Ms. Krebel, are you on the line for the Operations Committee report?
Yes, I am. The Operations Committee met May 17th. We didn't meet. We contacted each other by phone on May 17th. And what was interesting is that we actually discussed if operations is doing what operations should do. We discussed what is our committee's responsibilities and duties. It was believed that previously with the committee that they may not have been working on issues that were appropriate for the operations committee. So Swick Allen helped us out in that call, and we have decided that we will be working on procedures. And what we're concentrating on at this time right now is encryption and what those procedures will be. We want to work with the governance and user groups and developing those and using those procedures and enveloping them within the policies. So I am asking that any committee members who have an assignment or things that they feel the operations committee should take care of to please contact me. Right now, like I said, we're trying to concentrate on encryption. They felt that that was a need right now. So I encourage the governance and user groups, if you have anything for the operations committee that you need from us, to please contact me. And that's where we are right now.
Thank you, Deb. Any questions for Deb? Chair Hagan, the Outreach Committee report then.
Thank you. We also had phone conference, and Sean was on there telling us what he's been working on and going to have some stuff that we can continue to share. Mike Bryant is on our committee. He's a retired career firefighter from Ames, and he will be our member on the new standard committee. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ellen. Sean, First Net Outreach.
Thank you, sir. So first of all, the WISE video, we're on the final draft of that. I just need Tom's approval and we'll post that to the internet. We've been showing it in the RIC Metro outreaches just to kind of get a feel for what people like. So far, it's met with very positive comments. The WISE testimonial, we just shot that. We're going through the first review of that. So hopefully we'll get that posted as well. Trooper Luke Valenta was kind enough to give us some time to talk about his experiences in using the WISE pilot. Peace Officer Memorial, we're in the first draft of that. The commissioner asked for us to come off the bench and help her shoot the Peace Officer Memorial, so we're trying to get that video done. The telecommunicator video, we've already started scheduling. We're working with several Des Moines and West Des Moines. We're starting to get them on the calendar for when we're going to go out and shoot their telecommunicators in action. The website, we've been doing lots of updates with the website, including a full revamp of the Isicsb forms. I know Chair Buffington made a comment about that. We had our first meeting to review and determine what the new process flow is to make this easier for him and his committee, as well as the board in receiving applications, as well as our customers, for lack of a better word, making it easier for them. So we are highly involved in the flow chart. Stephen Rodriguez and Rhonda McKibben were also present in the meeting to provide this overhaul of this process. Of course, we continue with our social media posts. The newsletter will go out again. The Tuesday after the board meeting is kind of the time we've settled on. Please send us anything you want for us to include in that. We're really looking for the meat and potatoes. We want to know what the people in the field want to hear, what their interests are, and what they want to talk about. A lot of things that are coming in is, incremental interoperability. This is what we have now. The state system isn't available tomorrow. What are we going to do when that happens? So we're really trying to address and bring in case studies and talk to people in the field and saying, this is what we're going to do if a disaster happens tomorrow, and this is how we're going to prepare for when the statewide system is in place, and this is our interoperability plan and how we're going to use our equipment. That's kind of been a big thing we've been talking about. Outreach, we did just finish our Metro outreach engagement yesterday, as Chair Buffington mentioned. That was probably the highest attended outreach to this point. I think it went very well. We're going to start a new regional outreach. The new SWIC, Chris Myers and I, have started discussing a strategy for that, as well as we are also looking at FirstNet with AT&T and statewide testing and seeing where we can start looking at in our state to try out FirstNet when it becomes available and see what it looks like and how we're going to implement it and what it'll look like for public safety. We have started initially looking at a project for an app summit. We talked about, Marty talked about Beyond. We are reaching out to the field to say, hey, what apps are you using? How about if we hold an app day in which we bring in vendors, they talk about what their app is, we record it out here in West Des Moines, and we stream it to you. Here's the benefits of these apps. Here's what's going on. You choose. We know for a lot of the telecommunicators and a lot of the other public safety people, they don't have time to go and see all this. So we're going to do it. We're going to record it. We're going to stream it to you so that you can watch these videos whenever you want to see what's going on in the field. Ethan, as well as John Tell Harris, will be the kind of the project team on that. I'm just kind of support. But we're very excited. We're working with Homeland. We're working with the vendors. We're working with Motorola and their Wave app. So we want to make sure everyone knows that, hey, we're trying to answer and we're trying to figure out what it is you want to hear from us and your struggles of, hey, well, we have more and more volunteer firefighters using this app to respond to calls than radios. How does that work? Does the state have any contracts in which we could leverage pricing? We're really trying for the operational problems that you guys go through and to try and say, is there something we can solve? Is there data we can gather? As well as putting together packages for you when you start preparing or start looking into the Isicsb platform of what other people are doing, what does the map of coverage look like for you, or what will it look like according to the engineers, of course, because until it's built out, we don't really know. We only have the engineer diagrams. So you can start educating yourself and looking at what other people did for their proposals and what their vendors promised and looked and showed them. And then we need to make sure to disclaim and disclose, don't think of apples to apples, because what Dallas County did for their build out is not necessarily what you're going to do for your county. So make sure you take an open eye view of whatever they had and whatever they decided to do or Westcom decided to do might not be what you need to do in your county or your agency, but at least you can see the process that they went through in evaluating vendors' proposals and everything else. And as part of the new Isicsb application plan, we're creating a standard input so that whatever vendor advice or consultation is given to you, we have a standard form to receive it and catalog it for when you do decide to join Isicsb. No matter which vendor you choose, we're gathering the same information, and we'll also be providing that to the vendors so they can see this is our standard template of data that we need to gather. Thus, as part of that, we'll increase and improve our CASM experience. We've been going through a CASM overhaul in tandem with our Isicsb to make sure all of our tower sites are up to date, all of our PSAP information is up to date, all of our contacts for our public safety entities is up to date. Why? Because if you decide you want to use CASM or the CASM app, now it's probably extremely useful, and we'll be one of the few states that has it as up to date as we're having it up to date. I'm not going to say we're the only, we're going to be one of few though that has really just overhauled all their data to make sure it's up to date. So that's a pretty big thing that we've been working on. Video. We had the pleasure of having Lieutenant Josh Hale from the ISU Police come down and visit us. This guy, I tell you what, I thought I was an IT nerd, but man, he puts me to shame with his knowledge of technology. He is on another level. And what we're doing is working with him to create videos to help bring awareness to public safety about potential attacks, potential ways that people can access your systems. And then eventually we'd like to also talk about apps and your mobile platforms. Lieutenant Hale said that he would work with us, and he said he'd be willing to be videotaped so that we can put this on the website so that all of your agencies can educate yourself on this. And I tell you what, like I said, I've been in IT for 20 years, and this guy, I couldn't even put the gas in his car with the level he's on. You know, he's just another level. I mean, it's like NASCAR and a normal person driving a car. He's NASCAR all the way. So I can't say enough about him and his spending time with us. The ITAG, the Iowa Technology and Geospatial Conference is coming up. We were lucky enough to get an invite. At first, I thought we weren't going to be able to afford it, but due to our RIC 2 chair and vice chair, they were able to secure a table for us to put up a small FirstNet booth. I thought this was really great of Brian Blodgett and Joel Roney to do this for us, because our GRS people are becoming more and more critical as part of our infrastructure and our part of technology and interoperability. So I thought this was really great. Give us some time to meet up with some of these IT folks who are doing the geospatial stuff. And last but not least, RIC 6. We're still trying to secure a RIC 6 chair and a vice chair. And this is going to be the thing that I'm going to say every time until it's done. We're putting together a special strategy to adjust for this region. Whatever it needs to happen, the new SWIC and I are going to, if this is what it takes, we're going to drive to each of these people's houses and do whatever it takes to get someone from Region 6 to step up. Now is the time. The new state plan is coming. It's going to be probably here in the next 60 days. We can't have the second most populated region in the state of Iowa not participate in some form to give this a read over. And whatever the concerns would be, I'm just here to make sure that they know we see them. They're very important to us. And I can't tell you how much strategy, time, and outreach effort we're going to put in, but we've been already putting in effort. This is taken to the next level. So if you have friends or anyone that you know of that might consider it, we sent out a special outreach email. I'm sure the board all received that, requesting that people participate in their RICs. This is a heavy lift. And more hands are going to make this much better, and more hands and input from you guys, the operational people, is going to make the difference in whether this technology works the way you need it to, or if you just have IT people develop it in their little IT rooms and then you deal with it however it rolls out to you. Now, that's kind of a scary thought, because as an IT guy, I don't know what you guys know. I can build whatever I need to build, but I'm not the rubber hitting the road. My life isn't on the line. So when I build something, it might be functionally great, but operationally, it might be a piece of junk. And the only people that can say that are you folks and the people out in the field. So I just want to make sure, this is important, and whatever help we can get for RIC 6 to get them engaged would be appreciated. So I'll get off my pulpit now. So any questions?
Sean, Tom.
Yes, sir.
Could you go back to your, I'm sure you worked with Helen on this, but you did all 6 regions, and I assume they're complete, correct?
That is correct.
Can you give the board a general feel of the success of that, and what is the plan for the next round? Unless I missed it, I don't think I heard that, because we do have a plan, a very aggressive one, for next round of outreach on the Isicsb system.
That's true. The next round is a strategic plan that the new SWIC and I have started building. The current primary focus is RIC 6 to get that handled. And then we'll evolve the plan from there. I want to make sure it's not a fully vetted plan yet because we just finished this outreach. Now, this outreach, it was very interesting because I never seen so many vendors come out to these types of things before. A lot of telecoms would come out and they would talk to us about their interest in FirstNet, making sure that we'd heard them and their willingness to participate. We assured them that the ICN as well as the Isicsb board have been holding these public-private summits now for, I want to say, at least 4 years, or approximately 4 years, maybe a little less, in making sure that their names, their companies, anybody who's willing to come to the party for FirstNet, they're documented, and all of that was submitted to FirstNet so that when AT&T was named the prime, their name was listed. From there, the other thing, lots of questions about the Isicsb platform. We had lots of discussions about that and a lot of questions about misconceptions. And actually, we're going to do a misconception video and a handout because there's so many different questions about my county doesn't have a tower. Does that mean I'm going to have coverage? Hey, who's going to control this? There's so many questions. There's probably about 12 common misconceptions, and we're going to straight out handle those and make sure that everybody understands who's doing what. And then we're also, from this, we took away from the field's feedback is we want to know who's joining. We want to know what the processes that they're going through. We want to know, once they're on Isicsb, we want to know how it works. Somebody brought up the other day that when you guys visited Mahaska County, that you were still using the Isicsb platform, even though the nearest tower was approximately 60 miles away. They want to see the rubber hitting the road. And that's pretty much the main feedback that we received from the field is we want to see all this stuff. So as far as FirstNet, there's lots of concerns because of the AT&T Iowa footprint. Now, we have the engineer's diagrams of what it looks like, but I usually get some smirks and some chuckles about how AT&T...
John, I would ask that you stop at that point with the AT&T footprint. We have new and later information now, so I wouldn't want to have you give information that's not accurate as of today.
Sure. I'm just saying what the feedback was from the field when we showed the engineering map that I was last presented. So, and that's the thing. We've been educating the people and saying, look, this is what day one will look like should the state of Iowa opt in, and making sure they understand the process we went through and reviewing the opt-in, opt-out scenarios. So people understand that.
We'll have Rick Lumbar explain in detail here and give you an accurate depiction based off the meetings this morning on that.
Okay.
Okay.
So for the most part, it was very positive. We always send out surveys after. And so the next round, I'm sure it's going to be a lot more people we're going to want to see hands-on. They're going to want to see us turn something on, put it in their hands, talk about the ways they're going to use it. I think that's the way it's evolving toward. Any other questions? Comments? All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Sean. The training committee, Denise Pavlik, are you on the phone still?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. So the training committee met on May 17th via a conference call. We basically discussed the SCIP and their thoughts and ideas on what had already been done up to this point. I do have some information that I will bring to the workshop on the 28th. That is my intention. We talked about some trainings. I know that they are having a CommT training coming up And then they have September 5th, the National Guard is going to be holding their normal exercise, so they talked about that. We also talked about the Incident Tactical Dispatcher Training. It was a TA request, which we were not able to get in last year, and so we have kind of pushed that a little bit. We are currently looking into getting that at the Hawkeye Community College to be the venue. We'll touch base again when we have our call on the 21st to see if we've secured that venue. Once we do that, then we'll be able to get a date. I think that's a very important class. I think it's kind of exciting that we're going to be finally be able to get that, hopefully get a venue and then get that class scheduled. We talked about strategic planning for 911 and support. Really need to get with Blake on that. I know he's got a heavy schedule, so we kind of postponed that for a little bit, but that is something that we need to talk about. Other than that, we talked about cybersecurity and whether or not we should be thinking about classes for cybersecurity. And I think really that was all that we, in a nutshell, that we talked about. Again, our next conference call is on the 21st, and we have several other things on the agenda. And that's my report, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Denise. Any questions for anybody? Lots of trainings coming up. Technology Committee, Chair Updike. You on the phone still, sir?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I want to keep this brief because we're really going to drill down into this when we get to agenda item 20. But the Technology Committee met on the 25th of May and the 6th of June, and we've been dealing with this encryption standard as well as developing a programming guide. And so, like I said, we'll get into that into the agenda item 20, parts A, B, and C. Tom Lampy did request that we assign somebody from the Technology Committee to work with the standards group. Jason Studi from Pottawatomie County is going to step up to do that. And so I'm going to leave it at that so we can get to our other reports here, and we'll meet back at agenda item 20. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Rick or John Teller, are you on the phone from Dallas?
Yeah, this is Rick Lombard. Good morning. I have a brief update for you. We will have much more at the next update. It's very possible, committee, that you could actually have a motion to approve a state plan at the next Isicsb meeting in July. So I'll give you a brief update right now. Communication with the State FirstNet Committee and AT&T has been very open, comprehensive, and vibrant. I'm very encouraged by this, just given some of the concerns in the industry on how well AT&T would collaborate and cooperate with both private sector in Iowa and the state. It has gone very, very well, and I have no concerns at this time moving forward. We anticipate the state plan to be dropped into Iowa on or around June 19th of 2017, just here in a little over a week. And that will come via electronic portal, and Spock has been briefed and trained in how to operate that information. This portal is also the portal that the governor will use in order to acknowledge, approve, or make modifications of the state plan when that comes down. So it looks like we've greased all the wheels, everything's ready, and so we're just waiting for that state plan to drop. So the FirstNet Broadband Committee, we've been prepared for this. We have a approved process in place that we had already presented to you. So we're now just waiting for that event to happen. We will move into an evaluation phase. We will evaluate 3 sections of the state plan. We know what is going to be coming in the state plan by way of format. So we're prepared to do that evaluation. And at our next meeting that is coming up next week, we will actually divide up in evaluation teams and be ready for those 3 sections as soon as that happens. So we actually anticipate, depending on the quality of the state plan, that we could be bringing some form of recommendation back to the Isicsb board for further approval and then on to the governor's office as soon as the next meeting in July. So with that, we're continuing to go through a lot of detail surrounding the state plans. Nothing that is worth going into detail right now. So with that, I'd answer any questions. Otherwise, we look forward to the next 30 days where the FirstNet process moves from an idea to a plan to an actual reality. And I'll leave you with this affirmation from AT&T. They've said, if this plan is good, the draft plan will become the final plan. And if the final plan is good at presentation of the draft status, we could move forward with approval ahead of waiting for the other plans to drop in the nation. And so if this is good, we could move forward. It's very possible we could actually see the first FirstNet users no earlier than 30 days, but probably within the next 90 days, FirstNet could be a reality with users for our public safety stakeholders in the state of Iowa. So this is good news, provided that we have a valid and effective state plan when AT&T drops their solutions to us here in the next couple weeks. So that would be my update. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Rick?
Thank you.
Truly exciting for everybody that's here, that's been here this long. I mean, not as long as John or anything like that, but seeing this stuff come to fruition, it kind of seemed like it would never get here, but here it is. All right, moving on, other reports. Information sharing amongst board members. Anything good for the cause here? All right. The Motorola Project Manager update. Melvin, would you step forward, please?
Good morning. This will be a quick report following here. In a moment, it shows up on the screen. You guys let me know if you see it. There you go. All right. All right. It's been a busy month, so we'll start with the usual Gantt chart. We saw this from last month, so the thing to note here is that each region we've had positive growth as far as a task being accomplished. With Region 2 getting a lot of work done as well. On average, you see, 9 is the peak, 2 is the lowest, so we're somewhere in there around 5. That means that on a per regional basis, we're all, with except the Region 5, which is almost there, we're all way above the 50% mark on a regional basis. So when we look at the overall project, we went from 56 to 60%. Of course, it's always hard to judge what does that really mean, but there's definitely a lot of tasks that have been happening in the background. We showed this last time. Again, this Q2 starting in July and Q3 are going to be our busiest quarters for the year. Definitely a lot of activity in all of these sites, 35 in Q2, 26 in Q3. Overall, with the big number down here being a total of 89 sites throughout the state. So we've been ramping up, and we're about to get really, really busy. It seems like the raining has ceased, so that's good. We got a lot of openings that we can start draining and start pouring concrete in. As far as general activities, the biggest thing that's been keeping us really busy has been the integration of the Woodbury County. Woodbury County, we're going through the same thing as we did with Westcom. We have a connection to the simulcast cell, and they were in the process of being upgraded from 7.6 release all the way up to 7.16 to be compatible with the statewide core. We've managed to split the simulcast cell. We've added DC power, and right now we have half of the simulcast cell actually operating on the Isicsb core right now. But in order to avoid interference, we have those sites transmitting on dummy loads until we finish with the other half of the system. So the users right now are operating on half of the system as it is today. And by the end of this week, we figured that we'll be able to transition all the users onto the Isicsb core. It's very sensitive work. A lot of stuff happens in the wee hours of the morning, so a lot of coordination is taking place. A lot of tasks that have to be done when the sites get taken down. We got to do them in a hurry. Channel assets have been added to all the sites. So again, just a lot of coordination in order to minimize effect on local operations. So once that's done, we'll have Woodbury and Westcom, basically the two largest metro area systems integrated, as well as Dallas County as well. We continue to have microwave dish installations throughout the state. Again, as the sites become available, we're working on those. That's definitely a big task as well. Again, the biggest issue for us has been wind. Some of these dishes are relatively large, 6 to 8 feet, so having windy days means that we have to cancel those installs because those things start swinging around. It becomes dangerous. We'll have some work, we're working on some DOT site issues right now that we should be able to get through those in a relatively quick manner so we can continue building the additional sites. We're also working to have a mobile trunk site on wheels. Basically, we want to take one of the trailers and put in a site that is comparable to what you have on your sites. And we're working right now with our installer to get those fitted into one of the trailers, emergency trailers. We had opportunity to do training, so a core group from here went to do some training. Some of the folks are here. I mentioned if Dave or Scott could just mention a few words about their experience in the training. I figure that would be useful for you guys to hear. So if one of you guys want to come up front.
Morning.
Morning.
Several members of DPS, myself, Dave Britton, Scott Richardson, technician, Tom Lampy, from DOT, Steve Gray, and Jared, I can't remember his last name. Green. Attended the Systems Administrator course in Schaumburg and Motorola. It was a very informative course. It had to do with radio management, talk group management, radio IDs, system reports. There was an encompassing course about managing the entire radio system, like I said, system managers course. It's a course that's probably not necessarily for all users. It's going to be primarily for those folks that are involved in the administration of the actual radio network. But the instructor was great, in depth, answered all the questions. It'd be very helpful. We learned a lot of things about moving the system forward as far as managing the radio network. So, if there's any other questions, no?
Appreciate it. Any questions?
Thanks. Yeah, the big thing there is there's going to be opportunities for additional training, but we wanted to send them out there so that they can experience some of the flexibilities and the capabilities as a system, because that also helps in thinking when we start talking with the user groups or the technology groups. It starts to help that process of thinking, well, the system works this way, you guys want to do this, and it really just makes the conversation flow a lot easier. As Sean mentioned, the outreach efforts, we've completed those for all the regions. I was involved specifically to talk about the deployment of the system. And these were the core things that we covered. And I do feel that as we went through, it got better and better. And so I'm looking forward to the next phase because we can even focus more on either different committees and different groups and different entities throughout the state so we can get the message out more. See, these were the four main issues that we focused on, at least from my perspective. The biggie here is the reality of the system deployment. There is still a lot of disbelief that this is going to be deployed anytime soon. And so the main message behind the outreach presentation is that we're going to build this thing by the end of the year, and we're going to turn the keys over by summer of next year. So there seems to be a lot of surprise and shock by that, because it seems like everybody's hearing the opposite. This is never going to happen, not realizing all the work that we've been doing in the background. So the main message behind this was to make sure that people understood there's been a ton of work and a ton of money spent on getting this system to where we are just about to start doing a lot of physical work out in the field. We addressed a lot of misconceptions and concerns. Again, that was important because when you don't believe that the system is going to be built, that's usually accompanied with, well, but this and well, but that. And so there's a lot of misgivings about it. So we were able to address a lot of those there as well. The other piece of this, the other two pieces of this is the future and FirstNet. So one of the things that we want to make sure that people understood is that once we deploy the system, that's not the end of it, right? That you're going to have 10 years worth of software upgrades to the system. So capabilities and system capacity will evolve, and it only gets better over time. And that's for 10 years. And a piece of that is the fact that Motorola is a partner in the FirstNet and that endeavor. And because of that, we're able to put a lot of vision and software hooks into the system for enabling greater interoperability into those types of technologies. That's all I had. Any questions?
Thank you, Melvin. Any questions? Okay, moving on. I keep skipping over you, Jim. I'm sorry. Next month that won't happen, okay? Can you step up to the podium and give us an OEC update, please?
Just have a couple of updates for you this week, or this month, sorry. First, re-emphasizing Craig's mention of the SCIP workshop. The more voices, the more participants, the more broad and robust the input, the better the product. We're spending a lot of resources to make this a very quality, innovative SCIP plan. Would emphasize that we need your participation for this to be successful. Your ComT workshop that was mentioned earlier is scheduled at Camp Dodge. Colonel Hedgepeth recently retired, and two of your ComT instructors from Iowa will be holding that. It's 31 July through August 4th at Camp Dodge. Very pleased to note that I was informed yesterday in Nebraska that they've invited a couple of Nebraska's brand new ComT instructors to come over and learn the Iowa way. The Iowa ComT program and your instructors are very well thought of throughout the U.S., so I look for that to be successful. The other thing, Denise mentioned the possibility of doing the interoperable dispatch or tactical dispatch course. Would like to plant the seed as we look forward to 2018 and future requests. Just talked yesterday in Nebraska about a week-long interoperable communications week where a series of training classes were conducted simultaneously. ComL, ComT, AUXCOM, tactical dispatch, and it culminated with a functional exercise on the 5th and final days, bringing the different players together. That becomes much more real world in the delivery and how an incident communications event would work. So it's taking the theory and then putting the players together just after they've had this theory handed to them to begin to understand the practicality of delivering. So might be something for you to think about. As Craig has mentioned several times, the National Council of SWCS shares these best practices, and I know the North Carolina folks would be more than happy to share the results and how they put this together. So perhaps something for the future for the training committee. Have just two other real quick things. I shared with the 911 committee an innovation blog that I read earlier this week from AT&T that talked about when cows fly. I've just shared it with Sean for the committee. This particular innovation blog talked about flying a cell site on wheels on a tethered drone for the first time last month near Atlanta. I've previously been involved in a couple of briefings on how these are used in the military, and there are drones that can be deployed from a platform such as a small flatbed truck that can be GPS intelligent, meaning height is limited around airports depending on where the drone is launched. And they can hover for up to 30 days because they're ground powered rather than powered by onboard fuels like conventional free-flying drones. The reason I bring that up is I want you to take that one step further. This is a 700 megahertz LTE signal. We're talking about a future 700 megahertz TDMA network in Iowa. Does the idea of a deployable FirstNet or Isicsb platform capability pique your interest? Because that's the coming future of technology. Look forward to continuing to support you as this kind of stuff comes along. Lots of news coming out of the SPOC meeting, nothing that I can't say wasn't better briefed by Tom and Rick. Last thing I'd share with you is there is a little snippet in the news about denial of service attacks against 911 centers in the U.S., particularly happened in the San Francisco and San Francisco Bay Area this week. Don't have a lot to share, but what I can tell you from initial peeks under the covers did not affect call taking or dispatch to any significant degree, and we're having a little bit of trouble determining if what was initially classified as denial of service was more just a series of calls that people were, someone was attempting to make. So don't get too concerned about it, but as I always say, keep your eye on the prize. Awareness is preparedness, and that's all I have. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, moving on to old business. Swick Allen and CIO Von Wolfrat, ISSI Committee.
Thank you. We had culminated our remunerations, and you have a document in front of you. Those of you that are on the phone also had it emailed to you. The bottom line is at this point, the ISSI, after review of nationally what others are doing, we're having a hard time finding one that's working elegantly and flawlessly across multiple systems. There's some cases where a vendor A to vendor A and a vendor B to vendor B works okay. The challenge is when you start getting into vendor A working with vendor B and then vendor C enters the equation, it gets very interesting very quick. And then the first time one of the vendors upgrades their software, it gets even more interesting really quick. So in spending a lot of time with FPIC, the P25 user group committee, and then actually making phone calls to people that actually are having struggles with this, it just doesn't seem that it's mature enough yet for the kind of application that we'd be using in Iowa. The application that it might be applicable for is if you had County A and County B who are operationally going to share talk groups and use communication back and forth over area where County A's coverage wouldn't go and County B's coverage wouldn't go in A. It might make some sense to put up with the cost and the headaches of the challenge of taking this on. But in Iowa, the statewide platform covers all of the state, all 99 counties. It has coverage in population centers of over 30,000 that is supposed to be in building to some degree. And so when the bid error rate testing is in, it will qualify with 95% mobile coverage and a 1% greatest service. At that juncture, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the state of Iowa to spend millions of dollars and for the counties to spend upwards of millions of dollars to connect these two systems. And we're not talking about one connection because there are more than one vendor operating in the state and more than one owner of systems operating in the state. And as we looked at it, the push to talk return on investment divided against 3 million taxpayers, because it's the same taxpayer paying all the bills here. I couldn't find a way that it made any sense to justify that. And so in talking to the people that are on the committees and those that are actually trying to make things work that they've already purchased, the question is, if you had to do it over again, would you do it that way? And the answer is generally no. So we held a summit in March, brought in the senseis of all truth and knowledge from TIA, the overall chair, the chair of the TDMA 2-slot committee out of Texas, the chair of the wireline interface, which is what this particular application is, from, I believe, Chicago, and then the overall chairs out of Arizona, and then from Washington, D.C., the chair of the P25 User Group Committee. And after 3 hours, it wasn't any more clear that we had a clear path forward using an ISSI solution than before we had the meeting. So with that as a backdrop, my recommendation is that at this point, that if we consider ISSI, it wouldn't be for an LMR to application. It may have a role, as Jim Lindstedt pointed out, in some other applications as they come along with LTE. But the fact that we operate, or the statewide system is TDMA, most of the other user systems are FDMA, we can get into a situation where we are constantly going back and trying to work out kinks for interoperability that are not necessary. The equipment can be utilized, the subscriber units can be programmed differently, and so the board would have to then consider what implications that has with regard to PSIC grants, because the board put out PSIC grants some number of years ago for interoperability. There were a number of communities that accepted those grants, and then what if any obligation those entities have to be compliant with the statewide system as it's built out. The words that we will be compliant and are supportive of the system seem to be in the grants. The challenge is, what does that mean, and how much does it cost now after the grants money's probably been spent to make that happen? So I'll entertain any questions from the board about that topic. Anyone on the phone?
Okay.
Closes it out. Thank you.
Appreciate your work on that, as well as CIO Von Wolfrat.
Craig, this is Tom.
Yes?
Hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming there's a typewritten report that you and Bob put together?
You have it in this staff study. If you want something more than that, we'll be happy to put it together.
So this is not a report you're going to submit to the board for viewing, or?
I just did, yes. They have it in front of them.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay. Tracy. Standards Working Group.
My update's brief, but we had a little problems with the DePaul system, so we moved to Asana. I'm familiar with it because I use it with Polk County, but we're giving a seat for everybody that's going to be appointed to the Standards Working Group. So you're going to receive an email with information how to accept the seat, to sign up. I'm going to have the standards there where you're going to review them. I'm going to reach out to everyone to find out the best time, date, to have a monthly conference call. During that monthly conference call, we'll review, discuss the standard. You provide that input and feedback to me. I will make the necessary changes, and from there it's going to go over to Chair Benson with the Governance Committee. He's going to discuss it on the Governance Committee. They'll make their necessary changes, recommendations, and then it'll go to the board. This way, things are going to be moving a little bit better. The flow will be better, more eyes on it. I did have an individual who was appointed that wants to go back and share that information with the standard with his committee. If the board doesn't see anything wrong with that, I don't have a problem with that. If they want to entertain some discussion and recommendations from their individual committees, I am fine with that as long as the board is okay with that. But we're going to be moving a little bit quicker now that we have the better program, the better platform, process in place. I did have a wonderful conversation with Patrick Updike and Helen Trajanovich this past week. with the technology committee, and we discussed the importance of, yes, we have the standards working group who's going to develop that overarching standard, but we have these individual committees who were appointed, who have their job to do these individual policies that they have coming from their committee. So it's important to have that communication. So if other committee members do want to meet with me and say, hey, this is really what we're doing in our committee, here's information you can drive the overarching policy for the entire system, please let me know. I'm more than willing to set up a time where we can discuss it, because yes, you're going to have those individual policies. The standards that we put forth for the entire Isicsb board is going to be for the overall system. So we still have those individual policies that are coming out of the committees. So please reach out to me if you are interested in it. I thought it was very beneficial to kind of keep that communication open, and it helps us do a better job in the standards working group. Any questions?
Tracy, I have a question. I'm just racing through my mind. Do we have a policy yet for how someone wishing to be a operability user comes on the system?
We just have the basic guidelines with the memos. We don't have an actual standard, so I could put that forth and have that be a priority.
Okay. I'm asking if there would be a discrimination between a local user, a county user, and a state user as you look at your research. Because I guess I don't remember seeing any state agencies other than DPS and maybe DOT sending official requests to the user group committee. So I guess that leaves DNR and Public Health and others that have yet to complete that application process.
Okay.
And maybe that's because we haven't put out anything that would be,
Showing
definitive as here's how you go about doing it.
Okay.
Because the driver, I think, and I'll defer to Chair Buffington, but it seemed to me the driver had to do a lot with, there was an urgency because last year there was interoperability funds available for virtual consolidation, which drove many of the county and locals to say, how do we do it? How do we do it now? And now maybe that procedure needs to be in place so that we can have a clearer understanding of what it would take to do that. And I defer to the two state agencies I just talked about. Do you guys see anything? Is there anything I'm missing here?
No, I'd like to see more information on it, on what role I would have, public health would have on the system, and some of the policies and procedures for it.
I will get working on that and hopefully have it for the next meeting. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. All right, moving on to new business. Patrick Updike, you still on the phone?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, put your thinking caps on, because I'm going to give you a brief history on what the technology committee's been working on, because parts A, B, and C are all connected to one another. During the last 30 to 45 days, we've been working on this encryption standard with the hopes that we could develop a draft, if you will, for an encryption standard, have an attached non-disclosure agreement with it, and also a technical document that goes with it, and take that and move it on to the user group and standards group. Well, during that process, there was some concerns that maybe we were moving too fast into areas that weren't quite matured when it comes to encryption. And so on the 25th, Chair Lampe asked us to basically redirect our attention more towards the a programming guide and some of those topics that would go into how to put a subscriber unit on the system via programming. And so within that discussion, we started digging up old policies and procedures. Policy 2014-3 is a policy that says that there will be no encryption on any frequencies, interoperability frequencies, or channels within the public safety arena. The problem with that statement is that it doesn't address talk groups. but then at the time that it was adopted, there were no trunking systems of this magnitude built out. The flip side of that is that it still addresses LMR public safety systems. So fast forward to 2017, where you've got a trunked TDMA system that's about to go online. Obviously, that would fall under an LMR system. So that policy should probably be revisited and reworded because it's got holes in it by today's standards when it comes to whether you're going to have encryption on interoperability talk groups. It only addresses channels and frequencies at this time. And so if you've had a chance to review that, you can kind of see where there's the potential for some wording issues.
Patrick, this is Craig on that topic. Just to put things in context, when we addressed the no encryption on interoperability channels, it came out of a request from across the state to come up with a common encryption methodology, and we didn't have any support in the form of guidance and direction from the federal level, so that our adjoining states could go in one way, we could go in another. Since then, we've adopted the AES 256 model. The system is designed for AES 256. And I think that you've hit the nail on the head, that it is an opportunity to go back, align our two policies, address the issue of talk groups. We have laid out the talk group fleet map to include encryption on interoperability channels. As I recall, there's 3 per region. Since that policy, our policy came out that said there would be no interoperability channels encrypted. To Rob Dennert's credit, he was able to go back and scourge through and find in some of the 700 and 800 meg, there is actually set aside channels just for that purpose. So it's a great opportunity to go back and align our policy with the changes that have occurred since we issued it. We just maybe got out in front of it a little bit to help protect the interoperability on things like VLaw 31 and other places that appeared to be going in a direction that may not be in the best interest of some of our public safety users. So thanks for bringing that up.
Well, I think the board as a whole should, really consider all of this, and we can go back and amend that policy. I don't know if governance would want to do that, but my question right now is: are we comfortable with this procedure that has these interoperable talk groups on it? Are we comfortable with leaving that designated with 3 encrypted talk groups? Now, let me just say this much. Part of the technology committee says no. Some say yes. Some say doesn't matter to me one way or the other. So I guess this might be something for discussion within the board and the members of the audience.
I wonder if the way you framed that, if it might not be ripe for a discussion between technology committee and operations, who I hear Chair Krebel had mentioned that she needed to reach out to you on some particular topics. This seems to be one that then perhaps what we could do with it, Patrick, is address it at the SCIP meeting as a goal, and then come back with some clearer guidance. I mean, this encryption stuff gets complicated really fast. I don't know if at this point we want to take that on in a meeting, but if you feel that it's necessary, then obviously we can move forward with it. I just think that it might be worthwhile to have you and operations, technology and operations, at least collaborate first.
This is Tom, and I agree with that, Craig. However, the gist of the meeting with technology was, and the way I phrased it was, when you start talking encryption and encrypting channels, especially as many as that we allocated to encrypt, the behind the scenes to maintain those, i.e. the system administrator, is a nightmare. There's cost involved, there's tracking involved. So the reason I asked them to focus on other things for now is because what we're doing here is we haven't even started the car yet. And let alone it's not even being built. And as soon as it's off the line, we want to put mag wheels, turbocharger, lift kit, and everything on it. Let's drive the car for a while to make sure it works properly, and then get into the encryption piece, especially when it's come to interoperability encryption. Now, operability for other counties or cities that join, that's up to them. They have full control, and I want to stress full control over their own subsystem that they add. But when we start throwing encryption on interoperability talk groups, that's the system administrator's job to maintain those keys, and just with one vendor alone, let alone 2 or 3 other vendors. So that was the point of my meeting with the technology committee, and that's why it's on the agenda today. If we keep prolonging it to talk between committees, that's great, and I encourage that, but that was the purpose of it being on the agenda today.
Thank you. The point I'm bringing up is I agree with you that it isn't ripe for discussion and action at this point, other than to say that at this point we're going to stand down on it and continue to do our due diligence, because there's a lot of research and background that needs to take place. And I was suggesting that if we put it as a mark in the skip for, say, 36 months out, that might be a ripe time to take a look at all of the moving parts of this, so that users can become familiar with the technology. Those that have some understanding of the encryption model could help educate others that don't, and there could become a clear understanding of what the actual ramifications are in a model of, say, 36 months, or maybe 60 months if our appetite is concerned that we wouldn't have enough. The answer may be we don't want to encrypt at all. I agree with you. I just was trying to point it towards the skip, because I think that gives us an opportunity to put things in a timeline and align it with other activities that may be coming down life's road. That was my point.
I think part of the concern also with some of our technology members is they're going to be sitting there looking at the website, and they're going to see one policy that says one thing and a procedure that states another. And so I really wonder if the first line of business here is to handle Section A, which is to amend that encryption policy accordingly, and amend it so that we're including talk groups, if that's what we're going to advise the reader. And also the procedure that addresses the regional talk groups that have the 3 encrypted talk groups per region. Can you mark that with a TBD or something so that you've got it set up so it's basically saying, we could possibly do this in the future, but we're not doing anything right now with it.
Patrick, this is Jason. I'm sure that like a lot of people, some of this technology stuff is over their head a little bit. And so I'm just going to go out here on a limb and say that are you talking about bringing forward board action to amend this policy today? And if so, what is it that, what would it state that would make it any more clear than what it already is on the website? If the Isicsb platform is not up and operational at this moment in time for the users that are out there in the field, what is the hurry to change this policy at the present moment?
Jason, I can answer that because I probably should have elaborated a little bit more on this. So what happened was when we approved the fleet map with those all region, I think there's 3 per region, to encrypt those 3, we forgot about 214-3. We said we weren't going to do that. But we passed the fleet map with 3 encryption channels per region. So that brought up the topic during the technology committee, as maybe that encryption policy is a little vague. Personally, I think it's semantics when you're talking channels versus talk groups. But I think that's what he wants cleaned up, is put the word talk group instead of channel. It's one and the same, really. Maybe some think it isn't, but the intent of that policy is not to encrypt interoperability things. That was the intent. And then we passed, and not even realizing that 214-3 said we shouldn't do that.
Okay, so would it be too much to ask to have a revised policy actually put in front of us to have that done?
Yeah, I would suggest that, yes.
Okay.
But on 20B, the intent of that new business was to remove those 3 encryption channels off that fleet map.
The question is do you want to do that until you know how you've amended the 2014-3 policy? I know I'm probably making this confusing, but I'm looking at it.
The intent was to not encrypt interoperability, and we passed that. Now, whether we said talk group or channel at the time, that was developed before the fleet map was. And that's one of those things when it comes to technology, there's lots of terms that we use when it says talk group, channel, radio ID, encryption, 256, AES, mind-boggling. But the intent was not to encrypt. We didn't say at this time, we just said not to encrypt. So my point is, can we just get up and running first before diving into the encryption toboggle? Because it is not as easy as you think. You can encrypt all what you want, but the back things that have to happen from the system administrator standpoint to keep track of those, especially interoperability channels and other agencies, is not an easy task.
I agree with that. So if we are to go back to Section A, what do we need to do at this point to clean that wording up?
I think you can take it back to your committee, clean it up, and then bring it back for approval. But I think you can, if you choose to today, I think you can move forward on taking those 3 off of each region for now. You can always put them back later after we run the car a while. But that was my whole point.
Well, here's my suggestion is this A, B, and C. How much of that has to be done right now this month at this board meeting, Tom and Patrick?
Well, DI, removing the encryption on the regional talk groups, should probably be done sooner than later because we programmed the fleet map into the system with Motorola, and then we change it, and then we take it out, then we change it, we take it out. It doesn't cost us any money now, but it does take time to do that.
Okay, but another month won't hurt it, correct? To have a model policy brought forward and have this stuff.
Another month. No, another month's not going to hurt it, but it depends on how far you want to kick the can down the road. Is what it amounts to.
Right. I'm not. Nobody here is trying to kick the can down the road. I don't think anybody's trying to do that. I think they're just wanting more of a seamless process to follow along with, so it's not so muddled. That's all. So I guess that was my suggestion is to have it go back to Patrick's committee, and if it needs your help or somebody else's help to work in the language of that, let's do that first. Let's keep the horse out in front of the cart.
Jason.
Okay. Remember, I agree with that, but remember the intent was not to encrypt. You can change talk group to channel or channel to talk group, but the intent of the policy was not to encrypt. Now, if you're going to go back to the policy and change that and relook at whether you're going to encrypt or not, then I would say it's going to take a little more review. But all you're doing is change it's semantics at this point, in my opinion.
John.
I would respectfully disagree with that only because, I I could say the same thing about encryption, but what am I talking about, DES or AES? So, I guess from the technology standpoint, do we need any board action to clean up A, take care of Section B, which is to remove those encrypted talk groups, not really remove the encrypted talk groups, just remove the encrypted designation. Do we need board approval to do that?
I would say yes, because you approved the fleet map with those on there, and you also approved 214-3.
John, weigh in on this,
So I'm
please. Hold on a second, guys. John, go ahead and weigh in on this.
Just a word of advice to the board here. As a board member, I don't have the slightest clue what you're talking about with all of this stuff. And if I don't have black and white in front of me, I will be voting no on, I don't care what it is and what you say. There is a process that the board has put in place to bring these policy type of issues in front of the board. And traditionally that has been black and white presented to the board members so they can consider it prior to the board meeting. So my suggestion would be is for the Patrick's group to go back, and if they do have changes they would like to see to 2014-3 or the rest of these documents, that they make those changes, bring them forward, allow the board to consider them. If the quest is to get those done today, I would not be supportive of that effort. It's a sidestepping the process that's in place.
Thank you, John. Andy?
I would like to add, with that, I believe 2014-3, the spirit and intent of that is to make sure that any of our interoperable channels are not encrypted. And I think we need to move forward that, to Tom's point, I don't think we're hurting anything today by taking action on removing the encryption on all regional talk groups. That the policy is set aside. And I'm saying that we can update the policy to reflect that change, but right now the spirit and intent of that policy is to not have encryption, regardless if you want to call them channels or whatever. I think they're synonymous. And so I would be, I think we need to move forward and just, because right now we've adopted those regional talk groups as they were presented when I did that however many months ago, but I think we need to amend those regional talk groups to remove any encryption on them. It doesn't hurt a thing to do that today. The policy, I agree with John. However, what we have approved shows encryption, which is in contradiction to the, again, spirit and intent of the policy that we had moved 3 years ago. Does that make sense? I would make a motion to remove the encryption on all regional talk groups.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor to remove the encryption on the talk groups. Any other further discussion on that?
Should we be referencing a procedure within the Isicsb web page within that motion?
Which would be what procedure?
What is it, 2015-01?
You could, but there's only one fleet map.
What would the final fleet map look like?
Well, regard to the regional interoperable, there's 6, and 3 of those talk paths within each one of those talk groups are encrypted. Again, that I think that flies in the face of what the intent of 2014-3 was all about. So all we're doing is, my intent with the motion is to, of those 6 regional talk groups, for interoperable talk groups, that we would remove the encryption from any of those regional interoperable talk groups. So nothing else.
And I believe that meets.
Go ahead, Tom.
Patrick, did you send out the fleet map to the board members prior to the meeting? Do they have it in front of you, to John's point, so they can see what we're removing?
Yeah, that's on the Isicsb web page.
Oh, but they have it in front of them today so they can see what we're talking about, or could somebody put it up on the screen?
That I don't know.
It may be helpful if you can put it up on the screen there and see what we're talking about to get a visual, to John's point, which I agree with.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Marty.
We're correcting an error that the board made. So we made an error when we voted on the fleet map. And I believe that Andy's point is, let's correct that error. If we're going to add encryption in interoperable talk groups later, we can do that. we can change the policy if that's what the board chooses, but we're correcting an error that the board made. That's my point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate for a public comment at this point?
No, sir. Not at this point. So we have a,
Just to be 100% clear, this has nothing to do with the policy. My motion is only to remove the encryption from the regional interoperable talk groups.
okay. So removing encryption, we have a motion and a second on the floor. So Ethan, step up to the microphone and take a roll call, please. No further discussion on this? Go ahead.
Jeff Swearingen. Patrick Updike.
Yes.
Jeff Sunholm.
I would like to see documented proof of what it's going to look like, so right now I'm going to vote no.
Marty Smith.
Aye.
Tom Lampy.
Aye.
John Benson.
No.
Bob Von Wolfrat.
Aye.
Denise Pavlik.
Aye.
Andy Buffington.
Aye.
Ellen Hagan.
Aye.
Deb Krebel.
Aye.
David Ness. Jason Leonard.
Aye.
Rob Rotter.
Aye.
Mike Casper.
Nay.
Carol Lund Smith. Larry Smith.
Nay.
Linda Frederickson. Kelly Grosskirth. Twelve to 4.
Say it again.
12-4.
12-4. Yep. Thank you. Motion passes to remove the encryption from the interrupt channels. Moving forward, Patrick.
Okay, so moving on to the programming guide development. This was also sent out as a part of the agenda items. I'm hoping everybody got a chance to look at it because it includes part of this programming guide is to kind of put things in place for when you're ready to program your subscriber units. If you've had a chance to look at it, it's pretty empty. There's not much going on there just because we don't know that technical information to put there. But in that page 4 is a list of low power 800 meg and 700 meg channels. They're simplex channels. The 700 meg channels are designated for P25 use, and the 800 meg channels are designated for analog use. The purpose of these channels is to provide communication, and I'm going to draw Buffington into this conversation. The purpose of these channels, when you have like agencies responding to a location where they may not have access to a trunk system that's in place or somebody's analog repeater system, they just have no communications other than to go simplex on handhelds. These channels would provide that capability because these are the channels that you would have to use, not interoperability channels when you're talking between like agencies. So one example is if you have two highway patrol people in an area where they have no coverage, since they're like agencies, this is the channel they would use. They wouldn't jump on an interoperability channel. Part of this programming procedure that we're developing is to kind of provide guidance for the people in the user group and standards group, because one of the things that Mr. Buffington brought up was programming one agency's operational talk group into the system. In the big picture of all of this, this is supposed to help that process. I don't want to sit here and tell you what you can and can't program into your subscriber unit. But these channels, plus the interoperability channels that are built into the ICS 217A form that we developed under the Isicsb 12B policy, this all works together so that some of these conversations about programming other people's operational talk group in, it lessens that confusion. And so, just as a suggestion to the user group committee, you should really be looking at these things. So back to these channels that I just outlined, these low power itinerant channels. I would like to have the board just look at this because really what I would like to do is see the board approve FCC licensing on these channels because that's what's required to obtain these. What we would do is we would license them listed under our programming guide and possibly the ICS 217A form that we have in place. And these would end up in every subscriber unit, either licensed under the Isicsb board's license or the Isicsb system license, because I don't know if those are two separate things. That may need to be cleared up. So if you have any questions about that, let me know.
Patrick, this is Ellen. I'm trying to figure out what you're looking at. I've opened up my downloads, and I see words. I don't see any frequencies or anything.
It was called the Isicsb Subscriber Programming Guide Redacted Draft.
Oh, yeah. That's still on my phone. Thank you. I know what you're talking about now. Thanks a lot.
Page 4.
Okay.
I guess, is there any other questions or comments or concerns?
Patrick, this is just Jason asking, when you said that there were questions that you needed to clean up, what were they? And go ahead.
With regards to these 6 channels, these 6 low power channels, we know that there's an Isicsb board license that exists out there because we licensed the trailers, the STR trailers, at one time. So the question is if we get approval to license these frequencies, do we put them under that license, or is there a license that's being set up for the Isicsb TDMA platform that this would go under?
Okay, Tom, do you have any more input on that, or Craig, Chris?
Well, I would suggest having the committee make that decision and bring it to the board for approval.
Well, that's
including myself understands it fully when it comes to the frequencies and what you're specifically asking.
Well, the overall goal is to get board approval, or at least make a motion to let the board go ahead and license these either under the Isicsb board existing license or the Isicsb system license, if that exists.
Is that something that your group would be talking with the governance on?
We could do that.
Or is that appropriate? Operational? Is this what you're talking about with Deb, an operations committee?
I don't recall, to be real honest with you. I've had a lot of stuff thrown at me here lately. I mean, we can come back and visit this later if people want more time to digest it. It's just that
I think that would probably be beneficial here, Patrick, and having that more time, and more information on it. So.
Okay. Well, then we'll just revisit this next month.
I would also stress that if there is a question about other committee input that we need from that we forward that to those committees as well for input.
Correct. Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving forward, Mr. Benson, system keys policy, please, sir.
All right, the system key policy has come up through the standards committee. They moved it to the governance committee. Governance committee did review the document, worked with Tracy on it, did have some edits to the document that we made. They were minor. Essentially, the document deals with the control of the radio system keys, who's going to have authority to use them, those type of things. It also provides some recourse if there is misuse of the keys and what actions the system administrator, the Isicsb system administrator would take in those type of situations. That's kind of my 40,000-foot view of it. If there were any detailed questions, I would default to Tracy. But I would ask for a motion to approve the subscriber security document as presented to the board.
Okay.
In fact, I'll make that motion myself.
Okay. The subscriber security document has been presented with a motion from Chair Benson of the Governance Committee. Do I have a second?
Updike will second that.
Okay, I already have one, Patrick. I'll take it from Larry. And so I have a motion and a second. Do I have any further discussion on this? Something that Tracy's been working on quite a long time and John's taken a look at too, so. No other discussion? Go ahead with your roll call vote, Ethan.
Jeff Swearingen. Aye. Patrick Updike.
Aye.
Jeff Sunholm.
Aye.
Marty Smith.
Aye.
Tom Lampy.
Aye.
John Benson.
Aye.
Bob Von Wolfrat.
Aye.
Denise Pavlik.
Aye.
Andy Buffington.
Aye.
Ellen Hagan.
Aye.
Deb Krebel.
Aye.
Dave Ness. Jason Leonard.
Aye.
Rob Rotter.
Aye.
Mike Casper.
Aye.
Carol Lund Smith.
Aye.
Larry Smith.
Aye.
Linda Frederickson. Kelly Grosskirth. Yes.
Okay.
All in favor.
Okay. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you. Anything else? All right, moving on to public comment. Opening the floor to public comment. Please step forward if you'd like. Anybody on the line that wanted to give public comment that needed to?
Vice Chair Jason Hoffman here, member of the Operations Committee, User Group Committee, Region 1 Vice Chair. I guess I was trying to make that comment earlier. I'm fairly disappointed in the board's action on the encryption piece today. I feel I was the one that noticed the policy issue. My intention was not for the board to sweepingly remove encrypted channels from interoperability talk groups, but rather to consider amending the policy or sending it to a committee to work on. I think that there's a serious operational need for encryption. A D&E agent working with a local jurisdiction on a drug case, if we're going to drive everybody to the system and they've got no shared interoperability encryption talk group to go to, they're going to find interoperating more difficult. And so there was a lot of work done to develop the fleet map originally by a lot of people in a room, and it's unfortunate that decision was made today. I'm afraid it might give folks looking to buy subscriber units misinformation about the benefits of purchasing a radio with encryption. So that's all.
Thank you, Jason. I have the same reservations. I just the process isn't the cleanest here when you're talking about policies that may contradict with each other, and at this level of administration of it. So I don't know if that was the intent of what we're trying to do here, and that's something that we cannot, replace in time. Just as a matter of we clean up the process is all. So sorry to feel that way, and I'm hoping that doesn't create more issues in the long run. Hopefully have those issues worked out before we get to that point. So any other public comment?
Well, I'd like to close out with my last meeting, if I may.
Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, everybody, for putting up with me for 3 years and 3 months. I really want to thank the chair and vice chair for their guidance and shepherding through some very interesting times and a couple of very large projects. I want to thank Bob Uni. He's not on the board anymore, but he certainly provided me a lot of stimulation and energy over those first 3 years. I want to thank John Benson because when I'd interviewed the board members one-on-one, he told me that I needed to lean forward in the seat. And that was some pretty good advice, and I appreciate his efforts. I want to thank Jim Lundstedt for all of the support he's shown us. I don't know if you folks appreciate it, but Iowa gets an awful lot of support from DHS, and Jim's responsible for seeing that happens. I really think the board should take a look at themselves, how they've organized. We went from 15 to 19. We've got 7 working committees. The work that gets done away from the board meeting is enormous compared to where it was when I first got here 3 years ago. We were trying to do it all at a board meeting. Now it's done largely away from the board meeting. Today it took a little longer than we'd like. We'd like to get it down to an hour and a half and keep it there. But sometimes you have to take care of the hard stuff, and today was one of those days. So I really think the committee structure is an important element of the things that we've been able to achieve. The TIA membership, I hope you see value in that and sustain it because Iowa really is leading. It was interesting at the 911 Council that their passing of this resolution supporting 911 I3 was picked up on kind of the national wire, and some phone calls have come in here. We had the same thing that has happened to us on a couple of the policies that the board's put out. But interesting today, Jason was on, and just one of many. We had Rob up here. Typically Wally will come up and talk. But the local involvement that goes on at the board, that we were going out to meet and not getting any input, now we're meeting here, and the local are coming in via phone, and hopefully they'll be coming in via webinar here before too terribly long for all of you. So, there's over 75 people involved in the 7 committees. I've heard numbers of upwards of 100. I don't know that I could validate that, but I think I'm pretty solid at saying there's over 75. The policies and procedures that Tracy's been working on that are going to come out is just an enormous step forward. And the behind-the-scenes folks, Sean, Ethan, John Tell, Sweta, that have really put in just an enormous amount of effort into the FirstNet effort should not be lost on the folks, and I want to personally thank you. I want to thank Andy Buffington, Rob Coppert, Captain Walser, Rob Dennert, and Bob Sievert for blowing up my phone from time to time and keeping me honest. So thanks for everything you've done. If there's anything I can do for you in the future, you don't call. You got nobody to blame but yourself. I'm available. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Hearing no other public comment, can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you. We are adjourned.